What is going on, guys? I am DK Analyst Peter Jennings. I go by CSU Ram 88 on DraftKings.com, and I am back doing a lineup review for Week 3. Really high-scoring week, and we saw some monster scores, and we're going to take a look at some of the top lineups as well as the perfect lineup for Week 3. So let's dive right into it. We're going to start with the Millionaire Maker $7 million tournament with $1.2 million to first. Hoothead with an incredible lineup here, scoring 301 points. Let's take a look at who he used to make sure he got that $1.2 million with his first lineup here. So congrats again to him and an incredible lineup. So he started off with Cam Newton as his quarterback. I love Cam Newton this week, as you can see here with his game log. He's been pretty consistent the last 2 weeks. First week didn't do very much against Jacksonville, which is surprising, but had a great game here at home against New Orleans. Big thing I want to highlight here is he is rushing the ball, which is huge for a quarterback. Has had a rushing touchdown the last 2 weeks, which really boosts his floor and ceiling as a quarterback on DraftKings.com. So certainly a great pick here, and it worked out really well with 32 fantasy points for him. The next player on his list was Devonta Freeman. Devonta Freeman was the guy that you really needed to have, only 4,600 on DraftKings this week, and a guy that just had a monster game against Dallas. 30 rushing attempts for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns, which was massive. Also added 5 catches for 52 yards. If you didn't have Devonta Freeman in your lineups, it was going to be hard for you to win tournaments this week. Next guy that he had was Joseph Randle. So he took 2 running backs from the same game. Both these guys went off. Joseph Randle also had 3 rushing touchdowns. It's tough for me to take these Dallas guys a little bit because there's a lot of guys in that backfield, but man, they really went off. McFadden also scored, and Dunbar also had a big game. So all the Dallas running backs were heavily involved and all put up big games. So it worked out this week. It's a struggle for me to kind of pinpoint this, but if I were to take one guy, it definitely would be Randall. Next guy, and this is where he really won all the money, was the receivers here. Larry Fitzgerald. What can we say about this guy? Just absolutely killing it. Last week, you had to have him to win with 3 touchdowns and 112 yards. This week goes for more yards, more catches, 9 receptions, 134 yards, and 2 TDs. Just a monster game, and he's having a monster year to start he's having a monster year so far here through 3 weeks. So Larry Fitzgerald is a guy that you constantly want to look at, and Carson Palmer is looking to feed him, especially in the red zone. Julio Jones. Speaking of good receivers, this guy's been the best so far on the year. Just unbelievable stats. 12 catches, 164 yards, 2 TDs. Guy has just a ridiculous floor and ceiling. Looks like the best fantasy receiver by far in the league right now, and a guy you have to get in your lineups, even pay up for if you can find the value. Also have Brandon Marshall, who's very popular at 30%. A pick that I thought was the chalk pick here. Love Brandon Marshall just in general. He's a great play week to week. Again, he had that lateral, which was terrible, but still ended up with 10 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown. A really great play, and you'll see him a lot on lineups that did well week 3 on DraftKings. Greg Olsen. This is the biggest pick here overall, I would say, because no tight end had a game even close to what Greg Olsen put up. 8 catches, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pairing him with Cam, love the correlation here in the lineup, made a lot of sense to me, and he was the guy that you really needed in the tight end spot if you wanted to take down the big GPPs on DraftKings.com. Finally, LeGarrette Blount in his flex, had all running backs, 3 running backs here, all started early, so didn't have an opportunity to leverage the flex with a later guy. LeGarrette Blount, 3 rushing touchdowns as New England just absolutely crushed Jacksonville. This is the tricky thing. Deion Lewis was big last week, but it looks like New England's going to use multiple backs here, and LeGarrette Blount definitely is the red zone guy. So big kudos to him to nail in LeGarrette Blount. LeGarrette Blount only 2.2% owned. And then the Seattle Seahawks defense, the chalkiest defense of the week, going against Chicago without Jay Cutler at home after being 0-2. This is an obvious one. Pitch a shutout, get 18 fantasy points, and a huge week overall for Seattle's defense. So big congrats to Hoothead on an amazing week, and he is now $1.2 million richer. Big time congrats, and it's awesome to see the life-changing money that people are taking home here. So let's go to a qualifier now. This is one of my good friends, Dandy Don. He won the $3 Q and has just been on fire on DraftKings. He is arguably the best baseball player on DraftKings and is having a ton of success this football season as well. So let's look at the lineup that he took down here. A $3 entry, and he got into the 15 million Fantasy World Championship. That's going to be live on ESPN for the Final 10. So big time congrats to Dandy Don. Had Andy Dalton as his quarterback. Loved this play. Andy Dalton against Baltimore really had a huge fourth quarter. The Red Rifle came through big time here, and yeah, I mean, what can you say? 383 yards, 3 touchdowns. Really doing well, finding A.J. Green in the end zone here. So Andy Dalton, then you had Ryan Matthews. That was big play. The news came out on Sunday morning that DeMarco Murray was going to be out. So Ryan Matthews is a really elite play, $3,300, and he had a big game here against the Jets. Bilal Powell. This is one that I thought was going to be a really big play. This is the only play that really didn't work out on the lineup here for Dandy Don. Still put up decent fantasy points. 14.5 would have been fine last week. 7 catches, which is why I thought he had a lot of value. Only 31 rushing yards. They were behind a lot in this game, so that's why I didn't really have a big game on the ground, but still enough to get him there. A.J. Green, this is the big guy that he needed with Andy Dalton. We're going to take a look at him. 10 catches, 227 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What a day from A.J. Green here, and love the correlation play. This was his stack, Andy Dalton to A.J. Green, so great correlation there, and great job by Dandy Don. Julio Jones, we already talked about. Big week for him. Let's look at Steve Smith. Steve Smith still killing it. Steve Smith, Larry Fitzgerald, these older receivers, they're still having huge impacts on games. 13 catches, 186 yards, and 2 TDs. What a game from Steve Smith. Very impressive performance. And you needed him if you wanted to have a huge week. He was one of those other guys that just monster game. And good job there by Dandy Don. And I also like the game stack here with Andy Dalton and A.J. Green and then adding in Steve Smith. So then we have Greg Olsen we talked about. I told you needed him at tight end if you wanted to win. He had DeAndre Hopkins in the flex. DeAndre Hopkins is a great receiver this year with that big week 1 and also a nice week 3 here. I think he's going to be a huge play all year long. Definitely want to target him in your lineups. He's the number 1 receiver in that Houston offense. And then you had the Broncos D, which I love to see. Almost did as well as Seattle's D. I think the Broncos might have the best defense in the NFL. They allowed 12 points, but 4 sacks here. And you can look that they already have 6 interceptions on the year, and they have 11 sacks on the year. So this is a defense that's going to turn the ball over and get a bunch of sacks. So great job here by Dandy Don identifying a more contrarian defense than Seattle, and they almost performed as well. So great job here by Dandy Don. Congrats, and look for him in the $15 million Fantasy Football World Championship qualifier. Now, the last thing we're going to take a look at here is the perfect lineup that we would have had on DraftKings.com. As you saw with Dandy Don, he had Andy Dalton in the perfect lineup here. Aaron Rodgers was the highest scoring quarterback, but he was more expensive and you needed that salary to get the rest of these guys in. So Andy Dalton at quarterback, 35 points. Devontae Freeman, we talked about him, had to have him in the lineup, just monster game at 4,600. Chris Johnson, CJ2K making an appearance here on the perfect lineup. I would not have guessed that would have happened all year, but kudos to Chris Johnson, CJ2K. Arizona taking him off the trash heap, and wow, what a game. Only 0.8% owned. A.J. Green, we talked about that with Dandy Don's lineup as well. Perfect combination there with Andy Dalton. Steve Smith, another guy that was just an incredible play this week, old receiver. And then Keenan Allen, not really on any of these lineups, 1.8% owned. Another receiver that just had a huge week, so kudos to Keenan Allen, and he's been big already this year in San Diego. Building on that rookie year. He didn't have a great year last year with touchdowns, but man, he's doing great this year. Greg Olsen, the tight end you had to have, 7.7% owned, 36 fantasy points, and wow, just a huge performance overall from him. Larry Fitzgerald in the flex, again, with Steve Smith, the old receivers just going off, and a guy that I think can continue to have a really, really big year. He's not washed up, and he's looking great with Carson Palmer. And finally, a defense that we didn't see very much, only 2.4% owned, but wow, they went ham against San Francisco. Cardinals D, 28 fantasy points, tons of interceptions, including 2 pick sixes. Love this Cardinals defense. And the Cardinals, with that Carson Palmer to Larry Fitzgerald, John Brown, that defense, even Chris Johnson running the football right now, they might be a sneaky Super Bowl pick. I think they're one of the elite teams here in the NFL. So look to them on the offensive side, and if you can use their defense in a good matchup, I think that makes a lot of sense. So hope you guys can use this information. Remember to subscribe and like DKTV. I am Peter Jennings. I go by CSU Ram 88 again on DraftKings.com, and I'll be back next week doing another lineup review. Good luck in all your contests on DraftKings.com.